The Pinfeather Trial. Peck and Chick followed Maw Bewley and Aunt Hesidia out of the corn crib. They walked out past the two mid hens, which, in contrast to how they had seen them earlier, were standing vigilant and at attention with nary a quick straw twig in sight. They followed Aunt Hesidia around to the front of the cabin, where two rows of mid hens had cleared a path to the door. At the door, Fudgy and Wedgie were allowing chickens inside one at a time while keeping a sharp eye out for any troublemakers. The cabin was crowded. Nearly every available space was taken. The shutters on the cabin were open, and chickens were perched in the windows. Another pair of mid-hens escorted them to a place in front of the hearth where Walter and June and Viola were. A small barrier had been erected, and guard roosters were posted to keep them separate from the crowd. Maw Bewley turned to Walter and June and said, "Your chick is as good a chick, and Peck is a good friend to him." She then turned and flutter-hopped up onto the hearth. In contrast, Aunt Hesidia, with a grim elegance, stepped up onto the hearth. Hypatia sat in her nest, and Aunt Hesidia took her place to the right of the nest. Maw Bewley picked a spot behind the other aunties and sat down and got comfortable. Since there was a large crowd present, the aunties decided they should follow the more formal and traditional opening of the Council of Aunties instead of the more casual and abbreviated version, which consisted of Hypatia said, "Well, come on, let's get started." Aunt Lydia volunteered to be mistress of ceremony and address the crowd, but only after she pecked down three other aunties who wanted to do it. Aunties enjoy the pomp and ceremony that comes with their office, and they are fiercely competitive when it comes to being in the spotlight. Aunt Lydia strutted to the edge of the hearth and with her head high declared, hear ye, draw nigh and give heed, for the Council of Aunties has assembled to address matters of urgency and grave importance to the homestead. Today the Council of Aunties will address the charges of crimes against the homestead and other unchickenlike conduct leveled against the Pinfeather Brood. We will begin with the reading of the charges by the official Gallioarch Court Scratcher. Before Vance could read the charges, an angry hen squawked up, "Here now, what about the corn shortage?" That angry voice belonged to Biddy Polachek, who, by the sheer force of will and her huge number of chicks, managed to bully her way down to a place in front of the hearth. Not sure how to deal with this interruption, Auntie Lydia stood there for a moment before she replied, "What corn shortage?" "Don't play dumb with me," balked Biddy Polachek. "You know full well what corn shortage." Aunt Lydia indignantly balked. "I assure you I am not playing, because I have no idea what you are talking about." Biddy Polachek angrily replied, "I'm talking about the corn shortage that the Council of Aunties is trying to cover up." Aunt Lydia fluffed out her own feathers in response and declared, "Madam, I assure you that no auntie on this council would be party to such treason." She then turned and looked at her fellow aunties and anxiously whispered, "Would we?" Aunt Thalia adamantly replied, "Of course we wouldn't." She was eager to be in the spotlight because she was one of the hens that Aunt Lydia beat out of for mistress of ceremony. "We are honorable hens who had never condoned such treachery." She then turned to Auntie Melita, who was next to her, and asked, "Would we?" Auntie Glinda, eyeing them, asked, Are one of you two in on something and didn't include me? Or me, balked Auntie Luma. We're not in on anything, squawked Auntie Thalia. That's the kind of thing that someone who would say who was trying to hide something, clucked Auntie Glinda suspiciously. Annoyed Auntie Denoria flapped her wings and demanded, Well, you can't leave me out! Or me, squawked Auntie Sheila. Seeing that she was getting no help from her fellow aunties, Auntie Lydia turned back to Betty Polachek and, trying to prop up her sagging authority, declared, The situation to which you are referring to is not a matter that is currently before the Council of Aunties. Today, our only item of business is the charges of crimes against the homestead and other unchicken-like conduct leveled against the Pinfeathers. Seeing that Betty Polachek had nothing to say, not wanting to lose her momentum, Aunt Thalia had Vance read the charges. And Vance read, The first charges is first-degree illegal corn harvesting, in which Walter Pinfeather is accused of stealing corn from the corn patch and giving it to a non-chicken. Betty Polachek clucked. Oh, what? A non-chicken, said Auntie Lydia. What, you mean like a squirrel? Asked Betty Polachek. Feeling her momentum stumbling to an indignant halt, Auntie Lydia turned to Vance and asked, Was it a squirrel? Looking briefly at some papers, Vance replied, No, it was a field mouse. I heard it was a chipmunk, said a chicken from somewhere in the back of the room. No, it wasn't chipmunk, squawked another chicken. It was a raccoon. Oh, I heard it was a possum, said someone else in the crowd. Looking anxiously at Vance, Auntie Lydia asked, Are we sure it was a field mouse? Definitely, said Vance. Are you sure it wasn't a possum? Asked the other chicken. 'Cause I heard it was a possum. Annoyed Auntie Lydia squawked, No, the record clearly indicates it was a field mouse. Ah, that can't be right, said Betty Polachek. I heard it was a squirrel. And what I want to know is why is the Council of Aunties giving homestead corn to squirrels? Well, I'd like to know that as well, said another chicken from the crowd. Oh, I can't stand squirrels. Their bushy tails give me the willies. Raccoons are worse, said some chicken standing next to her. They not only have bushy tails, but they wear a mask. You can't trust anyone who wears a mask. No, possums are worse, said the anti-possum chicken. They eat things that most decent folk would never eat. It's so disgusting. If that's the case, then what right do they have to our corn? Asked another chicken. Yeah, balked the chicken next to her, especially since there's a corn shortage. What is the Council of Aunties going to do about that? Yeah, what are you aunties going to do about it? Protect our corn, said another chicken. Another one yelled out, Yeah, protect our corn. The crowd started chanting, Protect our corn, protect our corn, protect our corn. Hypatia would have enjoyed the drama more if there wasn't a distinct possibility of this silly crowd becoming an angry mob. She leaned over to Aunt Hesidia and said, I guess we should have left the public outside. And the aunties as well, replied Aunt Hesidia dryly. I suppose someone should do something. I could go get my fork weapon, said Aunt Hesidia. Unless you still feel that skewering some of the citizenry is in bad taste. Hypatia scratched the side of her beak with her foot as she considered this. She wasn't sure if Aunt Hesidia meant the mob, the aunties, or both. She decided that more than likely she meant both. Then she decided to appeal to Aunt Hesidia's ego. Since when do you need a weapon to control a mob? With just a hint of pride, Aunt Hesidia replied, You do have a point. She then stepped to the edge of the hearth and shoved Aunt Lydia aside, who at this point was glad because the fun of being in the spotlight was long gone. Aunt Lydia stood there on the edge of the hearth as her unblinking raptor gaze rolled over the crowd. Every chicken that fell under her gaze responded instinctually by crouching down and getting very quiet. When Aunt Lydia was sure she had everyone's complete attention, she declared in a voice that was as final as a decapitation, "This meeting of the Council of Aunties is now a closed meeting." No one dared to respond except Biddy Polichick, but when she started to say something, she was immediately silenced by Aunt Lydia's executioner gaze. Aunt Lydia turned to Vance and ordered, "Have the mid-hens clear the cabin." Vance immediately jumped up from his desk and fluttered to the edge of the hearth. He then called out, "All right, ladies, you heard the aunties. Let's go." Clearing the cabin was no problem because Aunt Lydia's presence motivated them to leave. The only thing the mid-hens had to do was to make sure that no one got stampeded on the way out. When the crowd had left, Hypatia turned to Aunt Lydia and said, "I guess letting the public in wasn't such a good idea." "I tried to tell you," said Aunt Lydia evenly. "Yes, you did," admitted Hypatia, "but still it was worth a try." "Well, I'm glad it's over," said Aunt Lydia. "Indeed," said Auntie Luma, "that riffraff should have never been allowed in here in the first place." "Agreed," said Aunt Lydia emphatically, in an attempt to recapture her brief glory as mistress of ceremony, and then she added, "I say it should be a rule that all council meetings be closed to the public." The other aunties clucked in agreement. "Port of order, ladies," said Aunt Finny, interrupting them. "I'm afraid we can't do that. According to the council rules of parliamentary procedure, only the superior mother hen could designate a council meeting open or closed to the public." Surprised, Hypatia replied, "Oh, I didn't know that. Did you know that, Hesidia?" "I did," said Aunt Hesidia, "which was why I did not oppose you when you said to let the public in." And then looking down her beak at Aunt Finny, she said, "I am almost impressed that you knew that, Aunt Finny. You may not be as incompetent as I thought." "Kind of you to say," replied Aunt Finny meekly, as she got a little crimson around the beak. "Right. Well, let's continue the meeting, shall we?" clucked Aunt Lydia. "Oh, I agree," said Hypatia. "We can begin as soon as the rest of you are excused." Aunt Lydia looked at the superior mother hen and said, "The rest of who are excused?" "You and the aunties," said Hypatia. Confused, the other aunties balked and squawked, with Auntie Lydia squawking the loudest. But, we have to be here. That's the rule, isn't it?" "Of course it's the rule," said Aunt Thalia. "Well, maybe there's an exception," said Aunt Denoria. "I seem to recall there is an exception." "Is this a joke?" asked Auntie Luma. Clucking with uncertainty, Aunt Thalia said, "A joke? Of course this is a joke." "Very good, superior mother. Ha ha, you got us with that one." Hypatia stood up and fluffed out her feathers. "It's no joke," she said. "I've decided if we can move this thing along the quicker without the public, then it should go even faster if you ladies weren't here as well. Therefore, I am exercising my prerogative to hear this matter without you." Auntie Sheila, sidling up to Aunt Lydia, whispered, "Can she do that?" "Indeed she can," said Auntie Finny. "Did you not hear? She is exercising the council rule of parliamentary procedure known as the superior mother hen's prerogative, which states, the superior mother hen can opt to hear any case without the aunties present, so long as she informs them of her decision of discussion and ratification." "What does ratification mean?" said Aunt Lydia. Aunt Acidia stepped forward and leaned down to Aunt Lydia until they were face to face and sternly replied, "It means that when the Superior Mother is finished, she will let you and the other aunties know what she's decided, and you will all agree with her and say what a good decision it was." Then, leaning in closer, she hissed, "Is that clear?" Aunt Lydia swallowed hard and replied, "Crystal." Aunt Sheila balked up and said, "Well, you don't have to pick me twice. I don't know about the rest of you, but I, for one, am glad to be excused. I am desperate to get my feathers done, and if I leave now, maybe Mademoiselle Poulet can squeeze me in for a touch-up." "Oh, you need more than a touch-up," chuckle-clucked Auntie Luma. "More like a complete overhaul." "Well, at least I don't look like a wrecked nest," clucked Aunt Sheila as she stuck up her beak and stormed off. Auntie Luma looked at the others and said, "Well, I guess we're done," and left. "I guess we are," said Aunt Denoria, and she followed suit. "Suits me," said Auntie Glinda. "I'm going to my nest and have a nice cup of dandelion tea." "Ooh, if you're going, so am I," said Auntie Melita. "Wait, don't go," said Aunt Lydia. "This isn't right. We should be here. We can't be dismissed so easily." "Oh, yes, we can, hen friend," said Aunt Thalia sassily. "You need to let the big clucks figure it out." Aunt Lydia haplessly stammered, But, I thought we were the big clucks." "Well, we're not," said Aunt Thalia as she headed to the door. Seeing that everyone was gone, Aunt Lydia looked at the Superior Mother hen, who made a humorous but somewhat coy shoo-shoo motion with her wing. Aunt Lydia then looked up at a glaring Aunt Hasidia, and finally she threw up her wings and surrendered and said, "Fine." She then fluttered hop off the hearth and scampered out the door. With the aunties gone, now Hypatia and Vance ordered the mid-hens to shutter all the windows closed and secure the front door as best they could, and then set up the guard roosters in strategic places all around the cabin to keep any would-be snoopers away. When that was done, Hypatia looked around and said, "Well, this should simplify things considerably." Aunt Acidia nodded in agreement and said, "Frankly, I don't know why we don't do all our council meetings like this." Hypatia replied, "Because not all our council meetings are as provocative as this one." "Did you intend to leave that in here?" asked Aunt Hasidia, referring to a dozing Mama Bewley. Looking at the old hen, Hypatia replied, "Oh, I forgot she was there." "Well, I suppose as senior auntie it wouldn't hurt for her to stay. Besides, it'd be a shame to wake her up." The old hen opened one eye and grumbled, "I ain't sleeping. I's just resting me eyes." Hypatia politely replied, "Oh, of course you are." Mama Bewley responded with a curt nod and closed her eye and shifted to get comfortable. Hypatia then turned to the court scrotcher and said, "Vance, are we recording?" Vance looked up from his desk and said, "Yes, Superior Mother." "Well, stop. We don't need a record of this. I'll tell you what to scratch in the official record when we're done." "Yes, Superior Mother Hen." Hypatia nodded and said, "Well, come on, let's get this over." She then looked down at June and said, "Now, Miss Pinfeather, or may I call you June?" Feeling confused and flustered by everything, June simply nodded her head. Smiling, Hypatia replied, "Good. Now, June, I know you must be concerned with the way we're running things here today, but nonetheless I want to assure you that what we are doing is in everyone's best interest. Therefore I must apologize for our false start, and as much as I hate to admit it, having the public in here was not one of my better ideas. Oh well, you know what they say, hindsight is 20/20. Having said that, and given your rooster's non-chicken affiliation and the public suspicion that the Council of Aunties has given corn to non-chickens, I feel it's best that we limit the proceedings to a select few so as not to cause an upheaval. Wouldn't you agree?" June nodded. Hypatia said, "Good. Now I'd like for us to start first and address the charge of your roosters illegally harvesting corn in the first degree." "Aunt Finny, I believe you have a witness." "Yes, Superior Mother," said Auntie Finny. "Very well, proceed." Auntie Finny looked around, and then she leaned over to have a whispered conversation with Walter. After a few minutes, Hypatia said, "Well, is your witness here or not?" Auntie Finny looked up and anxiously replied, He should be here, Superior Mother. Please just give us a moment." "Oh, I'm afraid I can't do that," said Hypatia. "If your witness is not here, then we must proceed." Then suddenly someone called out, "Here I am." When everyone looked, they saw a field mouse coming around the corner of the chimney. It was Dormus. "Sorry I'm late," he chittered. Seeing this, Aunt Acidia balked. "A field mouse? Your witness is a field mouse?" She then turned to Hypatia and complained, "Superior Mother, I object. What place does this lesser creature have here other than being food?" Before Hypatia could answer, Auntie Finny balked up. "Excuse me, but according to the council rules of investigation and examination, any chicken charged with a violation of rule or rules are to have a witness or witnesses called to testify as to their guilt or innocence. Since the rule does not stipulate that the witness has to be a chicken, it stands to reason that non-chickens can testify should the need arise." "That is a rather liberal interpretation of that particular rule," said Aunt Hesidia dryly. She then turned to Hypatia and said, "Perhaps, Superior Mother, you should rule on this." Hypatia cocked her head as she thought for a minute, and then she replied, "Contrary to what you think, Hesidia, Aunt Finny's interpretation of the rule is not so much liberal as it is literal, and in matters of interpretation it's always best to be literal. I'll allow it." Standing erect, Aunt Hesidia emphatically replied, "Superior Mother, for the record, I must renew my objection." Hypatia replied, "Your objection is noted, denied, and moot. Besides, none of this is on the record until I say it is." Aunt Hesidia turned her predatory gaze towards Dormus and replied, "Then since we are not yet on the record, then it stands to reason that this witness cannot actually be a witness. Perhaps it is a snack for someone of the non-cornetarian persuasion." Auntie Finny quickly balked up. "I respectfully ask that Aunt Hesidia please refrain from eating our witness." Hypatia said, "Oh, Hesidia, these council meetings are seldom so entertaining. Please don't ruin it by eating the witness, at least until we hear what he has to say." Again Aunt Finny balked up. "May I respectfully remind the Superior Mother that, also according to the council rules of investigation and examination, all witnesses called to testify are allowed to do so without fear or harm being done to them before, during, or after they testify. I assume this includes being eaten." "Ah, another point to the rule, fair," replied Hypatia gleefully. "This is getting interesting." Then turning to Aunt Hesidia, she added, "I'm afraid you must forego eating the field mouse at all, Hesidia. Besides, you shouldn't still be hungry, not after that big lunch we just had." Again balking up, Aunt Finny quickly said, which incidentally was provided by our guest here. "Really?" replied Hypatia. She then turned to Vance and asked, "Vance, did you know about this?" "I thought it would be a nice surprise," said Vance. "I know there are rules against non-chickens taking food from us, but I know of no rule that says we can't accept food from them." "Well, it was a jolly good feast," said Hypatia cheerfully. "I especially enjoyed the muscadines. I can't remember the last time I had such tasty muscadine." "Thank you, Superior Mother," said Dormus with a bow. "If you like, I can have some sent to you, along with the wild plums, which I understand you also enjoy." Overjoyed, and before Hypatia could respond, Aunt Hesidia squawked angrily, "In exchange for what? I suppose you expect us to give you some of our sacred corn." "No, not at all," said Dormus. "In fact, we would like to give you some of our corn." "So you have corn," said Aunt Hesidia suspiciously. "And pray tell, where did you get your corn?" "From our friend Ryegrain," said Dormus. Aunt Hesidia balked. "Who?" "My apologies," said Dormus. "I meant to say Walter. Ryegrain is our name for him. He has done much to help the field mice by sharing his corn with us." In an accusatory tone, Aunt Hesidia replied, "So by your own admission, Walter Pinfeather has given you corn from the homestead." "He has," said Dormus. Aunt Fanny balked up. "Oh, point of order. What corn Walter Pinfeather gave to the field mice was legally his, as it was gleaned from the ground." "No doubt after having been conveniently knocked off the stalk," said Aunt Hesidia as she looked accusingly at Walter. "That has yet to be established," said Aunt Fanny. "I will also point out that after a strict inventory of all the corn that has been harvested thus far, done in accordance with the rules of inventory established by you yourself, Aunt Hesidia, an inventory was done, and in the presence of the Gallioarch Scratcher, it has been determined that counting what cobs were growing in the patch and were harvested is more or less the same as to what is currently in the corn crib." "More or less?" asked Hypatia. Vance explained. "A minuscule discrepancy, Superior Mother, because we did not count stray kernels or spoiled cobs. Had we done that, then we would still be out there counting." Hypatia nodded and replied, "Oh, well, that does make sense. Well done, you two." "None the less," said Aunt Hesidia, "our corn supply is shrinking, literally." "By this you mean the cobs of corn of this season are shorter than the ones from last year and the year before that?" said Aunt Fanny. "That's what literally means," said Aunt Hesidia sharply. "Do you have any proof that my client is responsible for this shrinking corn?" "No," said Aunt Hesidia. "None the less, it is my duty as corn matriarch to take steps to conserve what corn we have." Viola leaned over and proudly whispered to Chick, "See, I done told you she was good, didn't I?" Chick nodded. Auntie Fanny usually didn't make a good first impression. Auntie Fanny the auntie was shy, naive, and awkward, but Auntie Fanny the rule fair was outspoken, sharp, and confident. He realized the old saying, which is true, you should never judge an egg by its shell. "Your sense of duty is admirable," said Auntie Fanny. "Admirable and thankless," said Aunt Hesidia bitterly. "Everyone wants their corn. No one wants to conserve, in spite of the fact that next season it may not be possible. When that happens, how do you think the public will respond? What you saw today with those chickens is just a taste of what will happen unless we take the hard steps to prevent it." Aunt Fanny replied, "Which is why you as corn matriarch chose to enforce stricter measures with your own corn workers." "That is where the majority of the petty thievery occurs," said Aunt Hesidia. "I know it. I just can't prove it. We can no longer ignore this problem. A kernel here and a kernel there, it all adds up. So when you became aware that Walter Pinfeather had been sharing his corn with the field mice, you decided to make an example of him." "I operate according to the rules," said Aunt Hesidia proudly. I suspected the possibility of illegal corn harvesting, which is why I made the charge. Immediately, Antefini replied. Which brings us back to the results of our investigation. She then turned to address Hypatia. Superior Mother, as you are aware, as rule fair, I am bound by oath that before agreeing to advocate for any chicken, I have to investigate the case thoroughly. And if during the course of that investigation I discovered the chicken is actually guilty, I have to present that evidence before you and the council. In this case, I found no evidence that Walter has illegally harvested any corn, nor do I believe he is likely to, not for himself, his family, or any non-chicken. The corn he shared with the field mouse was legally his. The field mouse, Dormus, can testify to that under oath. What good is a field mouse's word? Squawked Aunt Hesidia. Even if what he said was true, what gives Walter Pinfeather the right to give any corn to lesser creatures? According to the rules, he can, said Antefini, as long as it is his. Be that as it may, said Aunt Hesidia, I've discovered in the course of my own investigation that the corn Walter gave to the field mice had been planted and cultivated by them, which there is no rule against, said Antefini. No, but there are to be, said Aunt Hesidia sharply. Corn is a sacred plant, a gift to the chickens from the divine mother hen. It is not meant for lesser creatures. Now, if that isn't bad enough, I also discovered that Walter Pinfeather has been involved with the field mice in the planting and cultivating of other. Aunt Hesidia paused, and she closed her eyes and turned her head and looked as if she was gagging, and finally she managed to spit out the word. Plants. Such as muscadines and wild plums, said Antefini. Aunt Hesidia ground her beak and angrily replied, among other things. Again, against which there is no rule, said Antefini. No, but there are to be, said Aunt Hesidia. The only food that is worthy of a true chicken, besides corn, is the food we hunt ourselves. The only plant that is fit to be eaten by a chicken is corn, and then only the biggest and best cobs. Therein lies the problem, said Antefini, again addressing Hypatia, and said, the reason for our smaller corn is that the biggest cobs are eaten and the smaller ones are planted. Walter Pinfeather realized that the seed kernels from the seeds from the smaller cobs produced even smaller cobs. Aunt Hesidia reared up in righteous indignation and said, where is your proof? Right here, said Antefini. She turned to Dormus and said, we're ready. Dormus nodded and gave a short, sharp whistle. From behind the chimney appeared a walking cob of corn that was almost as tall as the average chicken. As it got closer, everyone saw the corn wasn't actually walking, but was being carried by a field mouse. Chick immediately saw it was Volma's. It was an impressive sight to see such a small creature carrying such a large cob. Everyone stared in amazement. Even Aunt Hesidia had the look of restrained astonishment on her face. Mama Bewley cocked open one eye and muttered, "Them cobs was bigger in my day." Volmus leaned the huge cob of corn against the hearth. Seeing Chick, he gave a friendly wave and then stood next to Volmus. Hypatia got up from her nest in the fireplace and walked over to the edge of the hearth. "I would like a closer look," she said. Dormus chittered to Volmus, and both the field mice got under one end of the corn and hefted it up onto the hearth. As they did so, Hypatia replied, "Great poppin' kernels. You little guys are strong for your size." Dormus bowed and said, "The small and the weak do not survive long in the deep brush. We field mice feel it is best to be small and strong." "You have a good point there," said Hypatia, as she examined the huge cob. "You say you grew this yourself?" "With rye grains, Walter's help," said Dormus. Hypatia shook her head in amazement. "I've never seen a cob of corn this big." Chick tugged on Viona's tail feather and asked, "Is that how big the cobs were in your day?" Viona nodded and said, "Pert near." Looking down her beak at the field mice, Aunt Hesidia asked, "Are we to believe you grew this yourself?" She wanted to believe that this corn was stolen, but as much as she hated to admit it, it was no way this cob could have come from the homestead. Dormus replied, "Yes, with Walter Pinfeather's help. He showed us that if we saved the seed from bigger cobs for planting for the next growing season, then we'll get even bigger cobs. And this has worked so well, we dedicated to cultivate other plants as well, such as muscadines and wild plums," said Hypatia. "Oh, among other things," said Dormus. Hypatia turned to Walter. "And you helped them with this?" Walter meekly nodded his head and said, "Yes, Superior Mother." Hypatia stood there quietly for a moment, looking at the big cob. Then she said, "Mr. Pinfeather, or may I call you Walter?" Walter cheerfully replied, "Oh, please do." "Thank you," said Hypatia. "Now, Walter, you mean to tell me you actually left the safety of the homestead and ventured into the deep brush?" Walter hesitantly replied, "Well, Superior Mother, I had to, because, you see, that was where they live. The field mice, that is." "And no one saw you leave?" Walter shrugged and said, "Well, getting out wasn't hard, and getting back wasn't either. It's no great feat for a grown chicken to hop up onto the wall and flutter down to the other side." "And what does that tell you about this rooster?" said Aunt Hesidia vehemently. "Sneaking off to do who knows what." "More to the point," said Hypatia, "what does that tell you about our defenses? I think at some point we'll need to look into that." "Oh, I agree," said Hesidia, "especially with rogue roosters coming and going at will." "Excuse me, Superior Mother," said Aunt Fanny, "but there is no rule against a chicken leaving the homestead." "There isn't?" "No, ma'am." Aunt Hesidia replied, "That can be easily remedied, Mother Superior. All you have to do is enter into the record and say it was ratified by the Council of Aunties." "But only after they discussed and voted on it," said Aunt Fanny. "A mere technicality," said Aunt Hesidia dismissively. "What would be the point?" said Hypatia. "You heard what the rooster said. Getting over the wall was simple, and we don't have the chicken power to keep watch over the entire wall." Aunt Hesidia started to say something, but Hypatia quickly raised her wing and silenced her. "We can discuss this later," said Hypatia. She then looked at Walter and asked, "Walter, why have you kept this knowledge from us?" Anxiously fidgeting, Walter replied, I'm sorry, Superior Mother. I was going to tell you, but I wanted to make sure my theory would actually work before I said anything. Then this whole illegal corn harvesting thing came up, and I sort of got sidetracked." Suddenly Viona clucked up. "'Tis nae entirely true, Superior Mother." She then turned to Walter. "Walter, y'all needs to be telling the Superior Mother, 'cause if you don't, I will." Tell me what?" said Hypatia. Walter just shook his head. "Come on, speak up," said Hypatia. "There's no need to be afraid." "Oh, he ain't skeered," said Viona. "He just don't want to get Aunt Hesidia in trouble, 'cause he done told her about his idea on the corn, but she nae listened." Hypatia looked at Aunt Hesidia and said, "Is this true?" Unabashed, Aunt Hesidia replied, I had a vague recollection of him saying something, but it has been tradition that when we harvest, the larger cobs are eaten and the smaller cobs are saved for seed. Yes, but tradition is not the same as a rule, said Auntie Finny, and to borrow a phrase from you, it can easily be remedied. You are correct, said Aunt Hesidia stiffly. Perhaps it is a tradition that should be changed, and if I have been wrong, I am a big enough hen to admit it. Then turning to Hypatia, Aunt Hesidia replied, Mother Superior, if I am wrong, then you be my judge. If you deem that I was wrong to save the biggest and the best cobs for such worthy chickens as yourself, then I'd to stand before you ready to accept the consequence of my actions. Oh, come now, Hesidia, replied Hypatia dismissively. Everyone makes mistakes. Besides, I don't think you are necessarily wrong. You are too kind, Superior Mother, said Aunt Hesidia. Nonetheless, if I am wrong, then I must atone. Feeling a bit embarrassed for her cousin, Hypatia brusquely replied, You're a good and loyal hen, even if you do get a bit carried away, said Hypatia. I wouldn't make too much of it. Looking genuinely remorseful, Aunt Hesidia replied, You are truly merciful, Superior Mother. But if I held others to a higher standard, then I too must be held equally accountable. To do otherwise would be hypocritical. Viola shook her head and clucked to herself. "'Tain't good, 'tain't good." Chick tugged on her tail feather and asked, "What's the matter, Viola?" She then leaned down and whispered, "When old hen hag starts acting all humbly, it means she's fixing to do something bad." Aunt Hesidia stepped closer to Hypatia. She then leaned down and only spoke loud enough for her to hear. "Just saying, to look out for you just like you did for me when I was little, remember?" Surprised, Hypatia asked, "When did you ever need looking out for?" "You don't remember?" said Aunt Hesidia earnestly. "I was a tall, gangly pullet, and you were my only friend, and you never made fun of me." Scratching the side of her beak with her foot, Hypatia recalled that as a pullet there were some chicks that made fun of Hesidia, but few were brave enough to do it to her face. "As I recall, you gave as good as you got," she said. "And I recall you were my only friend," said Aunt Hesidia. Hypatia got red around the beak and said, "Oh, now there's no need to get maudlin, Hesidia. It's not like you broke a rule." Aunt Hesidia stepped back and said, "Could you repeat that, Superior Mother?" Feeling misty, Hypatia brushed a tear from her eye and repeated herself loud enough for everyone to hear. "I said it's not like you broke a rule." Aunt Hesidia turned to address everyone. "No, I did not. By the Mother Superior's own admission, there are no rules against saving the biggest and best cobs for more deserving hens. However, ever since the Wilderling Wars during the reign of Superior Mother Hen Fenora, we do have rules against collaborating with non-chickens, which is what Walter Pinfeather has done. Walter Pinfeather, if that is indeed your real name by his own admission, collaborated with non-chickens. He secretly leaves the homestead to meet with the field mice and who knows who else. He even uses one of their foreign names, Grymme, which apparently is just one of his many aliases by which he is known in the deep brush. Who else does he associate with? Possums, raccoons? I have it on good authority. He is even friendly with the coyote, the worst of the lot. He shares our knowledge and resources with them, while I concede that the corn he shared was legally his. We do not know what else he has shared. For all we know, this traitor has been conspiring with the Wilderlings to overthrow the homestead." Hearing this, Chick yeeped. My dad is no traitor. Aunt Hesidia looked at Chick and sneered. And now we've come to the chick. Chick. Unruly, undisciplined, he's totally out of control. He knows nothing about what it means to be a proper chicken. He doesn't even attend a chick etiquette class. Of course, we cannot blame him for this, no, because Chick is just a chick. And I say the fault is with his mother, June Pinfeather. She has shirked her duty as a parent and has allowed him to do as he pleases. She is undoubtedly the worst mother hen in the entire homestead. Chick exploded in peeping fury. Shut your beak, you stinking old hen hag! No one talks about my mom like that! He then attempted to scramble up onto the hearth to attack Aunt Hesidia. He was nearly to the top when June grabbed him and pulled him back down. She then wrapped her wings around him and shoved him under her. Chick struggled to get loose until June stuck her beak down and clucked fiercely in that tone that always stopped Chick in his tracks. Chicks, that is enough! Chick stopped struggling and looked at June, expecting to see her angry face, but what he saw was worse. It was disappointment. Chick could handle anger. People got angry at him all the time. Anger just meant that the person was mad and would get over it. But disappointment was worse because it meant you had actually hurt that person. Chick really didn't want to hurt anyone, especially his mom. Ashamed, he buried his face in June's downy feathers and begun to cry. Tentatively, Peck looked up at June, and June looked at Peck and nodded. She then leaned to one side, and Peck slipped under her. He nuzzled up next to Chick to comfort him. Meanwhile, Aunt Hesidia turned to Hypatia and said, Superior Mother, when you have the scratcher enter this into the official record, I hope you will include this outburst as evidence of how out of control this chick is. Whatever crime that has yet to be proven against Walter Pinfeather, there are numerous rule violations committed by the chick, which can easily be proven. We have reports of him violating the sanctity of the barn and harassing Galatarians, in particular Sapphira Oddwaddle and Biddy Polichick. He has also been in the corn patch without proper hen supervision, assaulted a guard rooster, and is possibly guilty of third-degree illegal corn harvesting. He has also been harassing chicks that are above his station, such as Winifred Oddwaddle, and he has assaulted my own son, Burney Malcomb. What does harassing mean? Asked Chick. It means to bug somebody, said Peck. Oh, said Chick, well, Quinny does kind of bug me, but I never salted Burney. Confused Peck peeped. You never what? Aunt Hesidia said that I salted Burney. I never did that, but I did peck and kick him. Peck started to say something, but decided not to. When Aunt Hesidia had finished, Hypatia said, You have made some very serious allegations, Aunt Hesidia. She turned to Auntie Finny and said, Madam Rulefair, what do your clients have to say in response? Auntie Finny replied, I respectfully ask the Superior Mother to allow me a moment to confer with my clients to find out. Hypatia sighed wearily and said, Oh, all right, but don't take too long. I was hoping we'd be finished by now. Thank you, Superior Mother Hen, said Auntie Finny. She then huddled up with the Pinfeathers and Viona. Just as I suspected, clucked Viona. What? Asked Walter. Can you nigh see it? Clucked Viona. 'Tis plainly as the beak on your face. 'Tis payback for that tail plucking your chick gave to Hesidia's brat. Well, that would be my guess, said Auntie Finny. Viona nodded and said, That old hen hag can holds a grudge tighter than a starving tick on a possum's butt. I once heerd when she was a pullet, this cockerel joshed her once. She done nothing about it till she was grown and become overseer of the Gallio Art Court. And when that happened, her first order of business was to find a way to get that cockerel, who was now a rooster, exiled. Well, that's just homestead gossip, said Walter. I know Aunt Acedia can be harsh, but even she wouldn't go through all that just to get back at Chick. Besides, isn't there a rule against bringing something trivial as complaints about naughty chicks before the council? Well, there is, said Aunt Effie. It's the naughty chick rule, and it states that any problems caused by naughty chicks are to be resolved between the chick's mother hen and whoever the chick has offended. It's a fairly new rule that we passed because of all the complaints made to the council about bitty politics chicks. Walter asked, so why didn't Aunt Acedia try to resolve this with June? She did, said June, but her idea of resolving it was to punish Chick while doing nothing about Burney's bullying. That just didn't seem right to me. Oh, that old hen hag is ornery as a rattlesnake with a toothache, said Viola. She may be satisfied till Chick gets runt off. But Chick is just a chick, Bach Walter. You can't exile a chick. Oh, I don't think she's trying to do that, said Aunt Effie. She's trying to get the whole brood exiled.